Welcome back to another Professional Picks NFL season. So it's our first video of the year back after a long summer. But today we're going to be jumping in with a fantasy football video looking at targets by round. We set this up to mimic a 10-man PPR league. I know that's not going to be exactly the case for everyone's fantasy football leagues, but we're going in depth, player by player. So still a lot of good insight on this video,
Yep.
regardless of what league you are in.
Yeah, early August, so that means a lot of mock drafts, a lot of research, a lot of analysis, and we are right there with you and ready to jump into it and talk fantasy. It's good to be back.
Yeah, get right into it, Woj. So, as always, don't forget like and subscribe, comment if you're enjoying the content. But this is our first video back in a little bit, so
Gonna
let me
have a lot
know.
more fantasy videos, gonna have some Survivor, gonna have some weekly picks, some bets, a little bit of everything. Great channel to get a lot of content from us.
Awesome. Let's go right into it, starting with the first round. So this is we just grabbed the tiers from Fantasy Pros. So all these
Yep.
rankings are according to fantasypros.com, their PPR rankings, and you'll see they have some tiers as well. But round one, just grab the first 10 guys, and pretty much will be sequentially from there, round by round. But Woj did highlight a few guys that he wants to focus on. I have a few on my end, but we will start with Woj's throughout the video. So get right into it. And the first guy he has highlighted for us is Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. Breakout season for the Lions last year.
hmm
Um, they they do have a ton of weapons on that offense, but I want to hear what you have to say about Amon Ra. Are you up on him, or do you think this is too high of a rating for him at number four?
Yeah, the reason I want to take a step back, and the reason I highlighted him is because I think, for not to be too self-evident, but the first round pick is such an important pick, not because of how it really wins you your fantasy league, but because how it doesn't set you up to lose. You're looking at I'm looking at right now at ESPN's percentage of players that were on teams that either won the fantasy championship or made the fantasy playoffs. And the guys at the top end of the list are not the best players, but they're guys that were breakouts that year and really raised higher than their ADP. Conversely, a lot of the guys that were named as players that were on rosters that missed the fantasy playoffs, those were guys that were drafted in the first two rounds. So it's not the guys in the first rounds that are going to make you win the championship, but if they're not going to perform or if they're hurt, that is what is going to eliminate you from playoff contention. So this first pick is really important, and I think it's really hard to come by someone more reliable than Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think if I had to take a pick, I think he's going to be the number one fantasy player this year as for a wide receiver in a PPR setting. And I really like his production, how good he is at running routes, just like CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. I love the offense that he's in. It's balanced and it's getting better with Ben Johnson over there in Detroit. I just think with his production last year, fighting through some injuries, if he takes even the smallest step up this year, which people are projecting last year, his ADP was, he was a 10th wide receiver off the board. Now he's projected to be the third. I like him as the number one. Now, that doesn't mean I'm taking him over CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill because they certainly have lower floors, but I really like Amon-Ra St. Brown here. Sorry, higher ceilings, lower ceiling, higher floor. There we go. It's been a
Yeah.
while.
No, I mean I'm on the exact same page as you. I don't have anything on Amon Ra for this video per se, but like you said, the first round isn't going to win you your league, but it could lose you your league. I remember
hmm
back in high school, I had the first overall pick in the draft, and I took Adrian Peterson. We drafted earlier in the summer, and
hmm
sure enough, the next week, that's when he hit his kid with a switch, and
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
suspended for the entire year.
I
Before the season
predicted
even
that.
started, I was out for the year. Granted,
Yeah.
that is kind of a way out there situation that you're not really expecting to replicate,
But
but
hey, CeeDee Lamb he's in contract disputes with the Cowboys right now. He's holding out in camp. I'd be shocked if he didn't play week one, but people do that. People hold out. So depending on when your draft is, if there's still a rocky situation and CeeDee Lamb isn't under like this massive extension that he wants, that's a risky pick. And a good enough reason potentially to not take him if you have the second or third pick. Because if he misses a couple of weeks, that could really cost you your fantasy season.
Yeah, and to the same note with Christian McCaffrey, I think we're, he had an amazing season last year. Best running back, pretty much did all for the 49ers, key cog of their entire offense. But last year was his first time playing 16 games in a season since 2019. He was electric, but history says he's most likely not going to play 16 games again. It was 4 years since he last did that in Carolina. He's 20 years old. I mean, he's not that old, but I mean, the wear and tear is adding up, and he's already had a list of injuries up until this point. So I would, I mean, if you
You
have
have to take
another,
him at one. You
yeah,
have to take him if you have one. But
it's hard not to take him right, but sure enough, like he could get injured a couple weeks in, and then your second round pick is at the back end of that next round, and you're in a horrible spot. So
yeah,
I
you
just
can't
think,
avoid him because of injury, but it's something that, could cost you. Now,
right, I
his
just wouldn't want the
upside,
first overall pick in this
yeah,
draft.
his upside makes up for any potential injury because he's going to score a touchdown a game, but that fear is there. And that, could be a reason why you're fearful of a guy like Jamar Chase who's coming off injury. Same with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's a different story. He's in the Christian McCaffrey tier that if he's playing, he's borderline unguardable, but um, that's a different story there because of he's just a different breed.
Right. I mean, yeah, you can never predict injuries, but the key is just trying to play a little bit safer if you have that opportunity. You just want to
Yeah.
make sure these top guys they're gonna be playing week to week. You don't want to take somebody who might miss half the season. And
Yeah.
granted, yeah, you don't know that going into it, but go off the injury history, go off the age a little bit, and try to make those decisions.
Like we said, you're not going to win your fantasy league in rounds one and two. You're going to win it in rounds 3 through 6 when those picks are the guys that ended up being top five of the position. So this is, it's not necessarily playing it safe, but you got to be calculated here because it
Right.
is the most important rounds.
No, I like it. But all right, let's move on to the other player you wanted to highlight in this first round, and that is Brees Hall. I'm really curious what you have to say about Brees Hall.
Yeah, it's a good segue because I was talking about how, first round picks decide a lot. And I really like Brees Hall if he's healthy, but that's a big if. And this is the kind of pick that if you're in the back half of the first round, that can either win you or lose you your season, or really help you win or lose you because this guy has running back one potential with how he's played, especially his pass catching ability and what he did in that offense last year with a really abysmal quarterback room after Aaron Rodgers got hurt. This guy is so explosive and young, coming off an injury though, it is scary. The reason I highlighted him is because he's one of those guys that it depends on what your risk appetite is here in the first round and how juicy you think Brees Hall is. He, like I said, running back one potential. It would not shock me if he ends up there at the end of the season. He's just got some question marks around uh, his health. And then for these guys on the Jets, like fellow teammate Garrett Wilson, not only does their health and injury status affect their play, but so does Aaron Rodgers because the drop off at quarterback is so steep in that Jets locker room that it just tanks everyone's value more so than it would on another team. So a lot of upside with Brees Hall, even for the eighth pick in the draft, but also a lot of downside. And so I just wanted to highlight that to say that anything could happen there. Talk about a guy like Bijan Robinson. I think he's got a very high floor where he isn't Arthur Smith's gone, but it's still a very good offensive line in run heavy offense in Atlanta. Now probably a little more balanced with Kirk Cousins. Maybe they get the ball more to Pitts and London more, opens up the run game. I think he's a great dual threat back that is built really tough, that there's a lot lower risk with Bijan Robinson, but definitely a lot more upside to Brees Hall. So those are some running backs to talk about in the first round for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. I'm on the same idea as you are with Brees Hall. When he has played in those few games,
Electric.
he's phenomenal. I mean, he's pretty much going to score at least 20 points, if not more, fantasy wise. But personally, I think it's too big of a price for me to pay if I'm at the tail end of the first round, given the
Yeah.
injury history, given Aaron Rodgers' Achilles last year. I think they are banking a lot on Rodgers staying healthy, this team coming together, which would be awesome for the NFL. But personally, it is a little bit too much for me. I think even grabbing Bijan one spot above him, granted he has to be available, but I would be much happier getting Bijan Robinson at number 7 than Brees Hall at number 8. And you mentioned Arthur Smith's gone. He did not know how to utilize his weapons in Atlanta. Multiple first round picks, and he's focusing almost all his offense on Tyler Algier and
Yeah, it's
Brandon
weird.
Blair and Cordero Patterson. Like,
Loves Cordell Patterson. Yeah.
so I'm just hoping that Atlanta offense finally starts utilizing their weapons. I think that had to be an obvious talking point in the interviews.
Yeah, you
The
would
way
hope so.
Arthur Smith ran that offense. But
Yeah.
to that point, Bijan was about the same draft rating going into last year. Didn't have a fantastic rookie season. Played well, but didn't have all the opportunities as some of these other guys had. So I do think Bijan might be in for a big breakout year. Granted, he's already at number 7 on the list.
Yeah, running back three. He ended. So I'm looking at some stuff from last year in ADP versus actuals that I put together. And only four of the top 10 running backs drafted finished in the top 10. And then when you see the guys that landed in the top 10, some of them are wildly outside of the top 10 running back drafted, thinking like Kyron Williams, even Raheem Mostert last year. So it's a lot more. And conversely, seven of the top 10 or six of the top 10 wide receivers drafted in the top 10 finished in the top 10. So a lot more reliability there from the wide receiver side. You're getting a lot more risk when you're taking a running back in that first round and even the top 10. More likely than not, the top 10 running backs drafted will not be finished in the top 10 at the end of the season. So a lot of risk there, which is why, to your point, take the guy with a really high floor like Bijan or go for a wide receiver in the first round because barring injury, these guys normally lock up the top 10 when they're drafted in it. Now, I said
Yeah.
barring injury, and these guys, like a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, those guys got hurt. Um, but when they're healthy, they stick really close to their ADP, like Tyreek last year, AJ Brown, Stephon Diggs, while he underperformed, still top 10. Same thing with Devontae Adams. Um, so, and even Amon-Ra St. Brown, 10th wide receiver last year, finished top 3. So when these guys play, they perform a lot more reliability from the wide receiver position, especially early on, than you do have the running backs.
Yep. No, and I completely agree. That was my draft strategy last year. Going to be going with the same one this year. I'd take 2 wide receivers, round 1 and 2. I mean, if you're drafting in the middle of the round, McCaffrey for some reason is still there, you have to grab him. But
Yeah.
going into it, I'm planning on taking wide receivers round 1 and 2. Slightly less injuries in that position, and PPR, you're catching a few more passes from the wide receiver position, can pad those stats a little bit. And you could always try to find a flyer on a running back. Injuries are plentiful during the season, so I think you get, like you said, you get more lucky on the running back position and try to focus a little bit more on those reliable pass catchers early, just raising that floor for your team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else to add here, or do you want to
No,
jump
I
in?
think we exhausted round one, ready to move on to round two.
Perfect. Do it. All right, on to round 2. A few new
Fun names
names on
here.
this list, but we'll jump into Woj's first
Yeah.
player or 2 players that he wants to highlight.
Yeah. Couple
Similar draft
guys.
position, same division in the NFC South. Looking at Chris Olave and Drake London. I'm curious. I mean, same division, both younger wide receivers. Are you going to argue heavily for one over the other here? I mean,
I haven't personally decided which player I would draft higher. I know which player I think is more talented, but very similar situations here. Obviously, same division, like you mentioned, both young wide receivers looking to break out. Now you get a unique situation with Drake London where he's got a better quarterback upgrade and a new head coach, a new system. I just think Chris Olave is so talented that if Derek Carr can play mediocre, which we've seen in the past from time to time from him, he's got top 5 potential. Now, again, and this is kind of story and trade-off between every round in fantasy. Higher ceiling for Chris Olave, in my opinion. I think he's an incredible talent, but I think higher floor for Drake London as he's got a better quarterback and he's got other weapons around him. that make him not the huge threat where you're going to get double teams all day. We just mentioned Bijan Robinson is a dual threat out of the backfield, and then you get the nightmare matchup of Kyle Pitts if the front office and coaching in Atlanta decides to actually utilize his talents. Um, but these guys are due and slated for a step up. And like I said, it's guys that outkick their ADP is how you win your fantasy league. And I could very easily see both these guys finishing in the top 10 for wide receivers. As you can see, they're 11 and 12. I wouldn't be shocked if those guys both take a step up. So I think it's dealer's choice there. And do you pick talent here in Chris Olave, or do you pick the better situation with Drake London? That's just up to interpretation and up to the individual. But I like both those guys. Just with upgraded situations, maybe Derek Carr gets a little more familiar with that offense. Raheem Shaheed gets a little more comfortable as wide receiver as complement to Olave. A lot can happen. There's always some questions in the air, but I think there's no denying his talent as a player.
Yeah, I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, I'll almost always go with a younger player over an older player. Just
Yeah.
the wear and tear and just the ability to improve from season to season. You're not really seeing a guy who's 29 years old breaking out at 30.
Hmm.
But yeah, you'll see a lot more in their mid to lower 20s. To that same point, Devontae Adams, they have ahead of both of them. He finished 10th among receivers last year, so the exact
Hmm.
spot they have him right now. But I'm not sure that situation is any better. Maybe they're going to get a little bit more stability from the quarterback position, rolling out with Aiden O'Connell week one. But I just don't see a massive uh, ceiling for Devontae going forward. Maybe, I mean, honestly, he is a good floor pick. They don't have a lot of options. Honestly, number two option behind him is probably Brock Bowers at this point, uh, with Jacoby Myers behind him on the wide receiving depth chart. So I do think Brock Bowers, not kind of forgetting where his ADP is, but I do think he could be a big breakout at the tight end position
Yeah.
as a receiving tight end. But I just don't see Devontae going crazy and overperforming from last year.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
good thing about him is he's not really going to underperform. He's about as consistent as they come, but he doesn't have that, obviously he doesn't have the best quarterback throwing to him anymore. Rodgers is not in his locker room. But he's still, a great receiver, but 31 years old too. The guy's not young anymore. So, if you want stability, he's definitely going to give you a top 20 wide receiver, but you know, he's probably not going to break much higher than top 10. So is that what you're looking for in the second round? That much stability and insurance, or do you want a guy with a little bit higher potential? And to your point, I think I would avoid him as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, Marvin Harrison is higher up in the list, but once
That
again,
shocks me.
focusing
I
on
would
those.
not be taking Marvin Harrison at wide receiver 9 and 14 overall. I'm not taking a rookie that high. Uh, I just can't without even seeing some film on him first. I can't. I know he's
Yeah,
great. I just can't do it.
maybe if you're in a dynasty league and you're going to have him for several years, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Like I
I mean,
did that with I took a chance with Bijan Robinson last year in the first round because but historically higher running like first round running backs, especially that high, do really well in fantasy. So I followed the trends. He was the fourth running back off the board and ended up finishing 9. So he did well. Like he was a
right.
rookie, he was not the running back in a PPR setting. But again, yeah, I didn't leave him much room to exceed his ADP as RB4 there. And you're not leaving Marvin Harrison Jr. much room to exceed the wide receiver 9. Because if these guys play every game, he's not going to beat these really high volume passing offenses like the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, like the Lions with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and like the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb. It's just not going to happen. Even like with a guy, Jamar Chase and what is a somewhat balanced offense there in Cincinnati and Joe Burrow.
Yeah,
It's like if they're healthy, all else equal, if they're all playing every game, he's not getting that high of a ceiling.
yeah. No, I mean, I see that, especially not the greatest situation in Arizona. Probably
The
can
line is always
team that
offline.
defense around him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're getting passes from Kyler, who you never know what you're going
He's
to get.
not playing 16 games. What happens when the playoffs come around and you've got Colt McCoy gearing up again to throw to Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah,
It's just you also got to think long term there too.
Yeah, the last person I do want to talk about on this list, I was looking at the fantasy scores from last year, but I was really surprised to see Josh Allen finishing pretty head and shoulders above everyone else in the quarterback category. Because
Yeah.
I mean, we all knew he had plenty of turnovers last year. Some of that has to do with that offense being just so pass heavy and barely utilizing the run backs.
Hmm.
But I mean, I couldn't believe how well Josh Allen scored fantasy wise, even with kind of having that down season. So I do think, I mean, you could probably take a reach on Josh Allen if you're picking at the end of this round, but I would maybe wait till the third, regardless.
I personally couldn't do it without Stephon Diggs there. Not that I think Stephon Diggs is terrific anymore. I mean, he's still really good, but he's not, wide receiver three like he used to be. It's going to be a new look in Buffalo, and I'm not sure I'm willing to spend a second round pick on a quarterback that I don't really know what I'm getting.
Right.
Um, Again, it's just a little more risk averse for me. Josh Allen, so good. I don't think he's going to be the QB1 though. It helps that he's such a good runner.
That's my other point. And I mean, that's consistent throughout the list.
And now
Running
James Cook is
quarterbacks who could
stepping
also,
up and taking a little bit off if Josh Allen's played. Like he actually has a legitimate running back now. Takes a little bit away from him. Not a ton, but just something. I'm not a huge fan of taking a quarterback that high.
no, yeah. I mean, I honestly,
Again,
I can't
personally,
remember the
but
last time I picked a quarterback till like after round five, even. But yeah, I mean, just granted for how bad he played last year or how sloppy he played and still finished QB1 pretty head and shoulders above everyone else. I was just surprised to see that.
yeah. No, I mean, he was a beast. And if he cuts down on turnovers, then he's got even higher potential. So there's definitely an argument for it. It's just not my cup of tea strategy wise.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Anything else you want to mention on round two before we jump?
I'm all good.
All right. Going on to round three. Once again, we'll start with the guys that you want to focus on, Woj. But the first one we have here is Jalen Waddle. Already talked a little about or Tyreek, but how are you feeling about Jalen Waddle as wide receiver two in the Miami offense?
I personally love it. I love Jalen Waddle. I think he's so talented. I think he's in a great offensive system. He's probably the best. I'm trying to think if I'm going to eat these words. I think he's the best number two wide receiver in the league. Is there anyone that we just passed that was a better? I guess Brandon Ayuk is a wide receiver too, but I'd rather have Jalen Waddle than Brandon Ayuk. From a fantasy perspective and from a personnel perspective, I think he just can blow the roof off the place, really stretch the field. Great route runner. I could see this guy. I think he's going to finish in the top 10 at wide receiver as well this year if everyone can, is dependent on Tua, which is, I guess a question mark there. But, you're drafting Tyreek Hill at 2 or 3 because of that as well. So that's a non-factor in my mind. I liken it to the old Atlanta Falcons, old depending how old you are, with Julio Jones and Roddy White. Roddy White was the guy, one of the best receivers in the league. Um, in the late 2000s, and then Julio Jones came in, and eventually there was this passing of the torch when people realized that Julio Jones was so good. And I don't know necessarily if that's this year with the Waddle Hill relationship, but it's going to happen. Jalen Waddle is just that good. Tyreek Hill, he's 30 years old. He's probably lost a step. Now he's still a couple steps faster than everyone else, but he's coming to reality eventually. They're taking different trajectories right now. Tyreek Hill, you would think has to be getting worse just with age, and Jalen Waddle's only getting better. I'm a big fan of him from what I've seen personally, and this is a guy that I think in round three that can win you your fantasy league. I think this guy even has top five potential. He's just that talented. Like I can't even believe that Brandon Ayuk is getting drafted ahead of him, given how much I guess just people don't think the same way I think about Jalen Waddle. Um, but he's just so goddamn good.
Right. No, I mean I'm with you. It's gonna happen whether it's this year or next year. It's just gonna be a matter of time. Especially, I mean, Tyreek, like you said, he's the fastest player in the league, but he's one of the smaller players in the league as well. Once he does lose that step, he's gonna have a sharp decline. Um, I mean, he played phenomenal last year, so just a matter of waiting that out and seeing what happens. But I don't
Hmm.
think you could go wrong taking Jalen Waddle in the third round, and he potentially passes up Tyreek, who you might take in the top five of picks of the draft.
Yeah.
I do like your reasoning there. The one thing on Brandon Ayuk, there's a lot of rumors. Nothing's solidified yet, but it does sound like he's going to get traded to Pittsburgh.
Oh, is it Pittsburgh?
That's the rumor. So
I
I mean,
heard Browns and Patriots, and now the Patriots fell off. So the most recent report is Pittsburgh.
that's what I'm hearing. I
I
mean,
like that. I like that a lot.
yeah, if he goes into Pittsburgh, probably be number one wide receiver over George Pickens.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I mean, I think I would like him a lot more at 22, given a change of scenery, just with the amount of weapons in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's such a trade-off in San Fran because, you get this prolific offense and you have to worry about so many guys that he's open so often, but then at the same time, there's so many mouths to feed. So it's a trade-off. I don't like him that high. I thought he had an incredible season last year, and I think he had a lot of touchdowns, which helped, and I'll confirm that. He ended up, Brandon Ayuk, who I drafted in all my leagues last year, he ended as the wide receiver 14. So they're saying that's where he's going to be. That he's not going to do too much better, but with the production in San Fran, that's what you're going to get out of him, and I think that's fair. Um, but I just, again, I'm looking for guys that are going to keep getting better, and I think they can take another jump. They're saying by this ADP and wide receiver 14 that Brandon Ayuk will not make a jump with the 49ers. I don't believe he will. I do believe that Jalen Waddle has that potential. Now, will he here won't he remains to be seen, but I think he's got a much better chance than Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. Um, the only reason I would ever go with Ayuk is if he does get traded and becomes wide receiver one. And so I wouldn't like him if he went to New England. I don't think at
No,
all.
that's where wide receivers come down.
But if he does go to Pittsburgh, I do think that's a pretty good scenario for him. I'm
Yeah,
curious, what are your thoughts with Laporta being the number one tight end? I know he broke a lot of records as a rookie. Um, I have him. I got lucky. I took him second to last round last year, so he's one of my keepers this season. But I mean, it's just we talked about Amon Ra. They got Jamison Williams.
yeah.
They got a few guys on that offense to pass the ball around. So I'm just curious. Do you think Laporta's going to follow it up with how he played last year? Like I just think
It's
what
complicated. I do think he's going to end up being wide receiver one. Do I think it's worth the pick in the third round? I don't. If you look at again, I'm gonna reference this in all our videos for fantasy this year, where they were drafted versus where they ended up. The number one tight end last year was Laporta. He was drafted as tight end 18. Number two tight end, Evan Ingram was drafted as tight end 8. Even you can get so much value at the tight end position. The number 7 tight end, Trey McBride, he was the 39th drafted tight end. Like you can get these guys late in the draft. Now, obviously you got your Kelce's, but you're drafting Travis Kelce last year as a number one tight end in the first round. Then he ends up as the third best tight end, and now you're so much disadvantaged. So Sam Laporta here, again, you're not drafting this draft position gives him very little upside, in my opinion. He's not going to have a Travis Kelce season. He could still have a tight end one season, but he can't have this season that's going to win you your fantasy league, in my opinion. And
I mean, he's not
I don't
super.
think it's going to let you down, but I don't think, this pick is what really helps you catapult yourself into juggernaut status.
Yeah, no, I
This
mean,
this round, like now Sam Laporta falls to you in the fourth round, you scoop that up right away. Like that's a no-brainer. He's a hybrid tight end wide receiver that they use so well in that offense. It's just again, I don't like taking positions like quarterback and tight end so high because I don't think it gives them a lot of room for upside. These guys would have to have insane seasons to make it above and beyond worth what I'm drafting. I'm looking for that long tail result, and it's not there with this draft pick.
yeah, I mean, I got to see where he ends up falling, but I think Brock Bowers is going to be that next guy.
Yeah,
He even break the records Laporta put up last year. Um,
it's 100%. Like and if it's not him, like there are going to be guys that you can pick up off the waiver wire that will finish top 10 in at tight end. So you can't say that with certainty for other positions. You can't say that about a wide receiver and running back. It's going to happen at wide receiver and running back, like it did for Williams and Akua. but you you can't predict that. It doesn't happen every year. It does for tight end
Right.
without fail.
All right. And then we'll talk about your other player here on this list real quick before we finish up with round four. You do have Mike Evans highlighted. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Oh. It's a guy that I think a lot of people avoided last year because of his age and his quarterback situation. Then he turns around and is the number seven wide receiver in fantasy last year. I personally am going to stick with the same strategy that I did and many people did last year and probably avoid Mike Evans. But it's just so enticing. You get in the wide receiver seven, the guy's head is about as consistent as they come. Sticking with really the same offense last year, it's really a personal preference. But if you thought Mike Evans was going to fall off last year, you probably think the same thing this year, and hard to change your opinion on it. And if you didn't believe that last year, you got a steal drafting Mike Evans as the wide receiver 31 last year. Now he's falling at wide receiver 16, and he still does have that upside. He's got top 10 potential as he probably will every year as he's in the league, just given that he's Mike Evans. But for me, again, personally, I'm not going to touch him. He's 30 years old. Uh, and again, how I think that Tampa Bay offense last year was a little fluky. You had Rashad White finishing like top five at running back too. Like they just all around overperformed. Now, can they do it again? I'm not going to bet on it. Rashad White, number four running back last year. Again, you can find these guys late. You can find top five running backs late. You can't really, um, and it's often with wide receivers too.
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I've never been a big Mike Evans guy. I pay for it every year, but one of these years we're gonna be right.
Yeah, you keep saying it. We'll be right one day.
Yeah. All right, let's jump on to round four. We'll wrap up for our early round video here, just focusing on the first four rounds. But let's go right into your picks here. Got
Yeah, what did I say? Or Cooper Cup.
here with Cooper Cup, who I drafted a little bit too early last year, given the injury,
Yeah.
and for that reason, it's just ingrained in me that I have to avoid him now because I paid too heavy of a price for his production last year. But I mean, now he's projected fourth round pick. Is the value too high for you to pass up on him here?
It's tough. It's really tough because injury history and age is not working for Cooper Cup right now, who's 31 years old. That being said, wide receiver 19, if he plays every game this year, he's going to be better than wide receiver 19. So, like a lot of picks in the rounds three, four, and five, you got to weigh your risk and reward potential. He's definitely got both. He's got a lot of risk and got a lot of reward to him. If you're trying to play a really aggressive fantasy style, I think you take Cooper Cup here in the fourth round, especially if you're not wide receiver heavy like you. Now, if you're Kyle Slua and you took two wide receivers in the first two rounds, you're probably not taking Cooper Cup here. But if you got your wide receiver two slot open, Cooper Cup is an insane wide receiver two if he's playing. And it doesn't have to be Cooper Cup of 2 years ago to have that. Now he's got a great compliment in Puka Nacua, where he can be much more of a slot receiver, PPR, rack him up kind of guy than the all-world wide receiver triple crown that he was. So I think he's, again, as I'm going to keep saying it too, someone that could finish much higher than wide receiver 19 is Cooper Cup. I don't hate that spot for
Yeah,
him.
yeah, no. I mean, to the same note, I would also put Debo Samuel in that same bucket.
Yeah. Oh
He
yeah.
battles a lot of injuries, but I mean, he could easily finish as a top 10 receiver if he stays on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're picking safer in those first couple rounds, this is where you could kind of take some of those swings
You
if
got
you
to take calculated
pick
risk to win,
rounds later.
guys. If your goal is to win, you need to take a calculated risk somewhere.
Yeah. All right, and then next up you have here is DJ Moore. In that Chicago offense, played phenomenal, probably one of the best Bears wide receivers we've had in our lifetimes, minus Brandon Marshall.
Yep, that's the guy.
But yeah, I know. I mean, Fields left, got Caleb Williams coming in, a couple more wide receiving options. Do you see him putting up similar production here, or do you think there's too many guys for the ball to go around now? I'm just
Yeah, no, it's one obviously that I have my opinion on, and you can certainly there's room for disagreement. DJ Moore ended up at wide receiver six last year. you can very well argue that he has an upgrade at quarterback now with Caleb Williams. Again, I think it's fitting that he's a tier four, a tier above Cooper Kupp here because he doesn't have that injury history and baggage like Cooper Kupp has. But he's coming off a top six wide receiver season. He's got an upgrade at quarterback. Now, like you said, there's a couple more mouths to feed now with Rome at wide receiver. You got a solid run game with DeAndre Swift from the backfield. But if you believe in Caleb Williams, then I think you take DJ Moore here. Because again, he finished at the sixth best wide receiver. I don't think he can do much better than the sixth best wide receiver, but I think he can crack top 10 again if Caleb Williams has a solid rookie season. Can he do what CJ Stroud did? I don't even think he has to do that to have a good season and give DJ Moore some solid numbers. DJ Moore was drafted as the 20th wide receiver last year. I don't see why after a top six season, he's only getting up two spots. It just, and I hate drafting Bears players in fantasy because they never really produce. Last year he did, they paid him. And again, with Caleb Williams, if you think he's going to be halfway decent, then I think DJ Moore is worth the flyer here in the fourth round.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those high floor guys, in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
I said, finished sixth last year. Even when he was in Carolina with Andy Dalton leading those teams, he was still putting up over 1,000 yards receiving. Pretty much no matter what the situation was for him, he still would always finish as a solid receiver in the top 20, regardless. So I do think if maybe you took a couple other swings, I think DJ Moore is your guy to add a little bit of stability to your roster.
I mean, based on what we're saying, he's the best of both worlds. He's not going to finish much lower than wide receiver 18 if he plays all the games. Just given his production in body of work his entire career. He's like you said, he's just been reliable and consistent. And we saw just last season that he's got some boom games in him. Again, with what a lot of people would say was subpar quarterback play from Justin Fields. So you get an upgrade there. This guy is someone that will not lose you your fantasy league if he plays and could help you win.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page. All right, let's wrap it up with our final player here, Derrick Henry. Make it quick.
Yeah.
Your elevator pitch for Derrick Henry in Buffalo.
Another perplexing pick for me that if I was the 39th pick in my draft and Derrick Henry fell to me, I would have a long 2 minutes of thinking there because Derrick Henry's getting old. I think he's 30, might even be 31. I'm going to look him up. He's 30, turns 31 at the end of the season. That's extremely old for a running back, especially one with the miles that he has on him. That being said, the Ravens have historically been such a run-heavy team and rely on it that it makes it so enticing. And you get a guy like Lamar Jackson that gets this Ravens offense in the red zone so often, in the 10-yard line, within the 5-yard line so often that he's just got so much touchdown opportunity there. I don't know what I